For weeks, I had noticed something strange happening on my property, though at first, I shrugged it off as nothing more than a coincidence. Every morning when I stepped outside, the grass felt damp and soggy beneath my feet, as if it had rained overnight. But the weather had been dry, and I hadn't touched the hose in days. Puddles dotted my yard, some of them large enough to reflect the early morning sunlight like small mirrors. At first, I assumed it might have been runoff from a neighbor's lawn or an underground leak, but when I received my monthly water bill, my heart nearly stopped. The numbers had doubled, and I was being charged for an amount of water that could have filled a swimming pool. Confused and alarmed, I checked all the faucets in my house, searching for a possible leak, but everything was intact. There was no sign of water damage inside, no dripping pipes or malfunctioning appliances. That was when I started suspecting that something or someone was tampering with my water supply. Not long after I began investigating the mysterious water usage, I was introduced, rather unceremoniously, to my new neighbor, Karen. She had moved in just a few months prior, but in that short time, she had already managed to establish herself as the self-proclaimed ruler of the block. She had an uncanny ability to find faults in everything and everyone, filing complaint after complaint about the most trivial issues. A car parked too close to her driveway? Complaint. A child's toy left on a lawn overnight? Complaint. A dog barking for more than 5 minutes? Yet another complaint. Karen acted as if she owned the entire neighborhood, despite being just another resident like the rest of us. Her entitled demeanor and holier-than-thou attitude made her the kind of person people avoided rather than engaged with, but unfortunately, she seemed to have taken a special interest in my property. I often caught her lingering on the sidewalk, her eyes scanning my front yard as if evaluating it for violations only she could see. One afternoon, I finally caught her red-handed. I had been sitting by my front window, sipping my coffee, when movement in my yard caught my attention. There she was, standing on my lawn as if she owned the place, nonchalantly holding my garden hose and spraying water all over her front porch. My jaw nearly dropped. It wasn't just a quick rinse, she was methodically cleaning every inch, even dragging my hose further onto her property as she worked. I stormed outside, my voice laced with disbelief. "Karen, what the hell are you doing?" She barely spared me a glance, as if my outrage was nothing more than an inconvenience to her. "Oh, calm down," she said dismissively. "It's just water." I was livid. "It's my water. And my hose. You can't just take things from my yard whenever you feel like it." She scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "Don't be so dramatic. You have plenty of water. What's the big deal?" At that moment, I realized she genuinely believed she was entitled to whatever she wanted, no matter who it belonged to. I wasn't about to let her continue using my resources like I was some kind of free utility service. That night, I went out and bought a heavy-duty lock for my hose, securing it tightly so it couldn't be used without my permission. I felt a brief sense of relief, believing the problem had been solved. But Karen, as I soon learned, was not the type to take no for an answer. The very next day, I stepped outside and felt my blood boil. There she was again, using my hose as if nothing had changed. But this time, something was different. The lock I had installed was nowhere to be seen. In its place, I found the shattered remains of the metal clasp lying on the ground, and I realized with horror that Karen had actually cut it off. She had gone to the trouble of bringing bolt cutters, breaking my lock, and resuming her theft without a hint of shame. That was when I knew this wasn't just an annoying neighbor issue, this was war. Realizing that confronting her wasn't going to be enough, I decided to take things a step further. If she wanted to act as if she was above the rules, I would make sure I had undeniable proof of her actions. I installed a small, weatherproof security camera in a discreet location, aimed directly at the hose. Over the next few days, I let it run, capturing every instance of Karen sneaking onto my property like a water-guzzling bandit. The footage was even worse than I expected. She wasn't just using the hose to clean her porch, she was watering her plants, washing her dog, and even filling up a kiddie pool for her grandkids. Every time, she acted as if my hose was an extension of her own property, completely disregarding my boundaries. Armed with this irrefutable evidence, I knew it was time to escalate things in a way that Karen would never forget. Armed with undeniable proof of Karen's audacity, I decided it was time for some public accountability. I compiled the footage into a short video, highlighting the most egregious moments: her dragging the hose across the lawn, filling her kiddie pool while humming to herself, and, of course, using it to scrub her front steps like she was in a cleaning commercial. I posted the video online, titling it something along the lines of, "Caught in the act. My entitled neighbor thinks my hose is hers." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Comments flooded in, with people from all over sharing their own nightmare neighbor stories. Some offered legal advice, while others simply roasted Karen for her sheer shamelessness. Within days, the video had gone viral, racking up hundreds of thousands of views. The neighborhood caught wind of it too, and soon enough, Karen became infamous. People who had previously stayed silent about her antics now shared their own horror stories. She had stolen packages, berated teenagers for parking too loudly, and even threatened to call the cops on a kid selling lemonade. Suddenly, Karen wasn't just my problem, she was everyone's problem. Just when I thought Karen might finally back down, she did something that left me speechless. She filed a complaint against me. According to the letter I received from the Homeowners Association, I was being warned for unauthorized surveillance and creating a hostile environment. I nearly laughed at the sheer audacity of it. Karen, who had been blatantly stealing my water for weeks, had the nerve to act like she was the victim. Furious, I attended the next HOA meeting, bringing my footage as evidence. But the board, in their usual bureaucratic fashion, claimed that posting footage of a neighbor without consent was against their guidelines, even if it proved wrongdoing. I realized then that I couldn't rely on the HOA to put Karen in her place. If they weren't going to do anything about her, I would have to take matters into my own hands. That was when an idea, dark, petty, and absolutely satisfying, began to form. I decided it was time for a lesson Karen wouldn't forget. Since she loved my hose so much, I figured I'd give her a version of it that would make her think twice before ever touching it again. I contacted a friend who worked in waste management and asked if he could help me get my hands on something special, a small tank of non-toxic but utterly foul-smelling sewage water. He delivered it without hesitation, giving me a knowing smirk. The plan was simple. I would attach the tank to my hose and wait. The moment Karen helped herself to my water again, she'd be in for the most disgusting surprise of her life. I installed the setup late at night, positioning the hose exactly as she liked it. Then, I set up my security camera once more, because I had to capture this moment. The next afternoon, like clockwork, Karen slinked onto my lawn, grabbed the hose, and turned the nozzle. The instant the rancid liquid blasted out, her reaction was priceless. She shrieked loud enough to wake the entire block, stumbling backward as she was hit with the full force of sewage-tainted water. She dropped the hose, gagging and retching, while the smell enveloped her like a toxic cloud. Neighbors peeked out from their windows, drawn by the commotion, and soon enough, a small crowd had gathered. The laughter started slowly, just a chuckle here and there, but it quickly grew into an outright spectacle. People took out their phones, recording as Karen, drenched in the foul-smelling liquid, stumbled toward her house in a fit of rage. She screamed threats about lawsuits and calling the police, but no one took her seriously. The humiliation was absolute. After the sewage incident, Karen became the talk of the neighborhood. The video of her misfortune quickly found its way online, and once again, it went viral. This time, however, she didn't just have to deal with local embarrassment. She became a full-fledged internet meme. Comments poured in, mocking her entitlement and celebrating the well-executed karma. As if that weren't enough, the HOA, despite their earlier stance, finally decided to act, except not in the way Karen had hoped. Instead of punishing me, they hit her with a hefty fine for trespassing, destruction of property, for cutting my lock, and unauthorized use of utilities. This was the final straw for Karen. She became a recluse, refusing to leave her house unless absolutely necessary. And before long, the inevitable happened. Her home was put up for sale. The reign of terror was finally coming to an end. After the sewage incident and the HOA fines, Karen's presence in the neighborhood became almost ghostly. The once loud and controlling woman who had terrorized the block with her entitled antics now barely showed her face. She no longer stomped around issuing complaints or trying to enforce rules that didn't exist. Her front yard, once meticulously maintained to project an image of superiority, became unkempt, weeds creeping through the cracks in her walkway. It was as if she had simply given up. Rumors swirled that she was looking to sell her house and move elsewhere, and honestly, no one was surprised. She had burned every bridge in the community, and after becoming an online laughingstock, there was no recovering her old position of authority. Eventually, a "for sale" sign appeared on her lawn, and for the first time in years, the neighborhood collectively exhaled. Karen's house didn't stay on the market for long, and soon, a young couple moved in, Tom and Jessica, two friendly, down-to-earth people who were the complete opposite of their predecessor. Within weeks of their arrival, they had introduced themselves to everyone on the block, waving at neighbors, attending community events, and even organizing a small barbecue to get to know people. It was a breath of fresh air. The paranoia that had come with Karen's reign, where every small action felt like it might be reported or scrutinized, was gone. Now, people felt comfortable chatting outside again, kids played freely in their yards, and the tension that had loomed over the neighborhood evaporated. It was like a dark cloud had finally lifted, allowing the sun to shine through once more. Of course, Karen didn't disappear from existence. She merely relocated her reign of terror to another unsuspecting neighborhood. Through a mix of online chatter and mutual acquaintances, I heard that she had moved a few towns over, into a new community filled with people who had yet to experience her unique brand of entitlement. But if she thought she could start fresh and get away with the same behavior, she was sorely mistaken. It turned out that some of her new neighbors had seen the viral videos of her antics, and they wasted no time keeping an eye on her. The moment she tried to impose her will on the community, people were ready. Instead of letting her establish control, her new neighbors banded together, using the lessons learned from my story to counter her tactics. It was strangely satisfying to know that Karen's reputation now preceded her and that wherever she went, she would never be able to escape the consequences of her actions. After everything that had happened, I found myself reflecting on the entire ordeal. What had started as an infuriating case of water theft had spiraled into a full-blown neighborhood war, complete with public humiliation, viral fame, and an eventual victory. But beyond just my story, I realized that bad neighbors like Karen were everywhere. There were thousands, if not millions, of people dealing with similar situations, feeling powerless against entitled individuals who acted as if the world revolved around them. That was when I decided to channel my experience into something useful. I started a blog dedicated to sharing stories about nightmare neighbors, giving people a platform to vent, seek advice, and learn creative ways to handle difficult situations. To my surprise, the blog took off. Submissions flooded in from all over, and before long, I had built a community of people who had all faced their own versions of Karen. With Karen gone, life in the neighborhood settled into an easy, peaceful rhythm. My water bill returned to normal, my lawn remained dry unless I chose to water it, and I no longer had to worry about waking up to find my hose stretched across someone else's property. It was a strange feeling, almost like recovering from a long, exhausting battle. One day, as I sat on my porch enjoying the quiet, I noticed Tom and Jessica in their yard, happily using their own hose to water their garden. It was such a simple, ordinary sight, but it symbolized everything that had changed. The days of entitlement, theft, and neighborhood tension were over. In their place was peace, respect, and the simple joy of being able to live in one's home without unnecessary drama. And as I watched them laugh and talk, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction, because, in the end, justice had truly been served.